Birth control through the ages. A look at the history of birth control and its impact on the culture and society we know today. In the next few minutes, you are going to learn more about birth control than you ever imagined, I am sure, because I know that researching this project, I have seen more images than you can possibly imagine. First of all, we need to establish that birth control is a technology. According to the authors that we read this summer, yes, it's definitely a technology. It is something that was brought about for some sort of advancement or advantage to mankind. No, this isn't the Hughes and Postman view on going back to Eden or a perfect world, because, of course, according to biblical history, we are to go forth and multiply. But, and birth control is obviously in opposition to going forth and multiplying. But the definition of technology is something created for an advantage. The definition of birth control is any device or act that will stop or prevent a pregnancy from occurring during coitus. Birth control is an innovation. It's man-made. It was created for the betterment of society or the betterment of women, which is what a main theme in birth control is. In the beginning, if you look on the left of your screen, there's a condom. It's believed to be made of animal hide, most likely a crocodile or the intestines of a pig or a cow. I added the picture at the bottom because one of the things that was most disturbing that I learned in the middle of this project was that in ancient Egypt, females had the option of using something called a pessary. A pessary is a vaginal insert that is created from crocodile dung, honey, sour milk, and sodium carbonate. And it was inserted because it was believed that it stopped sperm or killed sperm because it changed the pH of a woman's vaginal walls. The earliest peoples didn't know what caused pregnancy. It wasn't until the Egyptians realized that sex caused babies, and sex at a certain time of the month caused babies. It wasn't until then that was happening. But the Egyptians did know, and they did begin to use things to prevent pregnancy. Although they did wear condoms, there was proof of that. They weren't sure if they were for pregnancy prevention or if they were for some sort of ceremony. Mostly, the only options that women had were abortion or infanticide, and that was to prevent or deal with unwanted pregnancies. That the killing of newborn babies was done often for ancient tribes when the tribe needed to be mobile. It was done if a woman's husband or mate was killed or died somehow before the birth of the baby to help prevent any more economic strain on this single woman. Obviously, that's not done now, but that's most likely because we have forms of birth control that are available to us. Abortion was common through, anything from a mechanical abortion to abortifacients, which were made by older women generally. Women use these. And most of the time, this act was illegal unless it was in some ancient tribe and it was part of their custom and part of their culture. These were illegal. There are still countries today that it's illegal. But then you have countries like China that if you get pregnant, your child goes into an orphanage if you refuse or hide your pregnancy and don't abort after, the second child, I think. If you look to the extreme left, there are different kinds of condoms that were used. In the middle, this is the first manufactured condom. It was made, and this is something that is going to be very foreign to you. It was made from rubber after Goodyear, vulcanized rubber. It was coated with petroleum jelly to save it. It was rinsed out after use and put back in this little wooden box. And the last one is a condom that comes with instructions, and I can't see it well enough, but I think that the writing is Latin. these were the only safe forms of birth control. Women had options, but they were either illegal or dangerous. And the funny thing is that this birth control has always been considered a female issue or done for the advantage of females. Casanova, when he used in the 1800s, he used condoms made of linen, tied with a silk ribbon, and he said that he used it to protect the fair sex from episodes of anxiety in case they got pregnant. As I said, Charles Goodyear patented the process for the vulcanization of rubber, birth control. It was still a taboo subject, but it was finally brought into the public light. In 1914, Margaret Sanger, who is a huge bright light in the advocacy of women's rights, she started fighting for women's rights. If you see the picture at the bottom, in the middle, it's a woman fighting off the stork. And the caption, which I cut off, says, "And the villain still attacks," or something to that effect. In the bottom right-hand side, Margaret Sanger's being arrested with her sister and another woman because they opened a birth control center in 1916, and it was considered illegal because of the New York Society for the Prevention of Vice, or Absolution of Vice, and by a man named Comstock. Comstock laws were instilled in 1865, I think, and he was an advocate against birth control. Didn't want it to be thought about, didn't want it to be talked about, didn't want it to be anywhere near society in any form. Condoms were illegal in the United States, but they were available for troops fighting in both world wars. As a matter of fact, the Army even provided them at some point. The United States realized that men were going overseas. It wasn't to prevent pregnancy so much as it was to prevent disease, because these men were going overseas and having sex with random European women and bringing home syphilis and gonorrhea and things like that. Women still had very little options. I realize that on the left at the bottom of the screen there's a chastity belt, and I know that that's really before the time of Margaret Sanger, but it's one of the things that women had to use. It's not something I could ever imagine wearing. I'm sure, ladies, you couldn't either. To further, sponges, douches, and abortifacients were still very popular, but they were either unreliable or safe. In the 20s, Lysol was advertised as a douche to prevent pregnancy after coitus. If you can imagine, we use Lysol today as a disinfectant, and it was used, and it caused burns, it caused some horrible side effects. Some of the other things that were used as birth control became more available, and oral contraceptives were introduced in the early 1900s. Women, they finally developed an oral contraceptive that was 100% effective, but had some horrible side effects because it was 4 times stronger than it needed to be. They eventually did come up with a pill. You can see the sponges at the top of your screen on the left-hand side. Those are some from the early 18th or mid 18th century and 19th century, and then the 20th century. In the 21st century, you can see modern birth control options for women. I think in that 4 square, the top left hand is a NuvaRing, which is a hormonal insert. Plan B, which is something for after sex, in case it's a backup method, in case a condom breaks or you forget a condom or something to that effect. The patch, it's a hormonal patch that goes on the lower part of a female's body, and it has the same effect that a birth control pill does. And then, of course, there's the pill packet. 86 years after Sanger's initial fight, laws regulating and banning birth control were repealed in the 70s, and the 70s were ushered in with new, improved, and safer options for men and women. Of course, abortion was still an option to end an unwanted pregnancy, but it was fought. That issue has been fought over and over and over again, and it's still considered a birth control by many people in our culture. Unfortunately, unless you want a vasectomy or you want to practice abstinence, the cartoon in the middle is for the men. This is an option, or a condom. as the years have gone, there has been talk of a male oral contraceptive, but again, this goes back to it being a woman's right to decide to or not to get pregnant with a consenting partner, and the issue comes back to women. What does this mean? The simple fact that the ancient people were concerned about preventing pregnancy says that birth control is an important issue to mankind and has been since the dawn of man. It's probably a bit of an exaggeration. I'm sure the ancient people, caveman time, people thought that a certain fruit or phase of the moon or looking at the right star would cause you to get pregnant. They didn't realize what it was. But it has been an issue since at least civilization, since man started to become civilized and started creating technology. The fact that women and men were both persecuted and arrested says that birth control is controversial. It has impacted our society negatively because of the constant fighting, and positively because some of those battles were won. And we do have options now. Women have the option of going to their doctor and getting something safe instead of going to a back alley witch doctor and taking some pill or drinking some tea or sticking something inside their bodies that is unsafe and unpracticed. Generally, this is a religious battle, hence the picture of the photoshopped condom cap on our dear Pope. The Catholic Church has long fought the battle against birth control. I can remember in my lifetime Pope John Paul distributing condoms and getting ostracized in the public by his church for doing that. I've heard quotes from our current Pope who says that practicing abstinence and teaching abstinence training is much more important than worrying about the lives of the millions of Americans that are dying of HIV and need access to condoms. So the church it's always been an issue within the church. There are so many people that believe that the Catholic Church is right, and that they have the authority because God says we don't have sex until we're married, and that's the only thing that's going to prevent pregnancy is abstinence. Then there are people that say that, people are adults, they get pregnant, it happens. We need to have options to keep that from happening so that we don't have. And pro-life, pro-choice, whatever your opinion is, that's another issue that just it tears at people and causes these horrible fights and these horrible debates. And I mean, we've seen elections won and lost in our country in my lifetime on the basis of abortion, on the basis of birth control. Everyone has an opinion. It's usually a strong one, and it's usually not something that can be changed overnight. So, has birth control affected our society as a technology? Of course it has. It's an issue that will always affect until there is something that's foolproof. Nobody's ever going to agree one way or the other. But it is something that will be done. There are so many articles out there. The links on my resource page will take you to more if you are interested in looking anything further up.